You're on.
Good evening and welcome to the Math and Science Academy's Board of Directors meeting for Tuesday, October 24th, 2023. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 6:15. We can have our student reps read the vision, mission, and land acknowledgement, please.
So MSA's vision is to be an innovative, sustainable model of academic excellence for all students that creates a well-rounded, lifelong learners and global citizens. And then MSA's mission is to provide an accelerated and inclusive curricula and instruction in all subjects with an emphasis on math and science.
MSA would like to acknowledge that the land which we gather on is the land of the Ochede Shakowee, the people of the Seven Council Fires and the Wapakute Band. It is within MSA's responsibility as an academic institution to disseminate knowledge about indigenous peoples and their history with this land. MSA works to build relationships with Native American students and families through academic pursuits and through historic recognition.
Thank you. Roll call. Wendell Sletton here. Isaac Leonardi.
Here.
Sarah Harms.
Here.
Karina Lozano.
Here.
Jules Kinkle.
Here.
Brian Linsmeyer.
Here.
Hedel Patel.
Here.
Dan Ellingson.
Here.
And Mary Yap.
Here.
Move on to the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I motion to approve the agenda.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay. Discussion? I would like to table 8A, item 3.
I'm sorry, which one?
8A, item 3, 515A to repeal. At the governance committee, we established that we need to repeal that at the same time we approved the new 515, which did not make it to the agenda as we were trying to be conscientious of the amount of policies that we had to read through for each meeting. So that was an oversight of removing 515. So we'll table that until November.
Can I ask for clarification?
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't realize it until shortly before the meeting when I was looking over this one more time. Do we need to add in the approval of the special meeting from October 14th since we conducted business that day?
Yes, we should have that included.
But we don't have minutes or anything like that, so.
We'll have to add that to November.
And I apologize, I didn't realize it until.
Mm-hmm. Any other amendments? So move to approve the meeting minutes with the tabling of 8A3.
The agenda?
Oh, the agenda, sorry. Thinking minutes because it's discussion. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes. Are there any conflicts of interest? All right, I motion to approve the 9/26/23 board meeting minutes. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Discussion.
There's one change I need to make.
Yep.
At the bottom, I approved it wrong for some reason. I put Sarah Harms treasurer. I am not the treasurer. I'm the secretary. I don't know why. I think I was reading it and I put the wrong thing. So edit for that.
Can I get, occasionally my name was mentioned as having voted after I left. So maybe just strike everything after page 4 with my name, and that's cleaner, I think.
It's one small.
Do we-
cor-
Oh, oops, go ahead.
Page 8. The explanation where it says policies 401, 428, 429. I think that's supposed to be 401.1 is an administrative function. Where it says 401.
I'd ask that we, on page 10, under the annual report, that we clarify who it is due to by October 1st. And there's a typo in number 9 on that same page. I'm guessing it's agreement on the verbiage. And is it possible to get the reconvene time on page 6? On page 6? And then for consistency's sake, I would ask that my name be struck and referred to as a board member on page 2. Page 1 and 2, I should say. So it's consistent with the rest of the minutes.
Numbers 1 and 2. Oh,
No,
okay.
page 1 and 2.
Page 1 and 2.
Everywhere else in the minutes, you have a board member. I'm the only one that's listed by name.
I think for that, the first one there, explanation, that can be, trying to see what else it is. It has to stay in the discussion as that is being called out of order.
Okay.
But in the top part, it can be changed.
So page 1,
Yep.
page 2.
Isn't it significant who asked to have a policy removed or discussed? For example, you asked to have 515A
Mhm.
removed because of inconsistency with what governance committee stated.
That's a
So
good question.
I think that's imperative for us to know.
And I mean, it's clearly there made, but the motion was made by. What's everyone's thoughts?
Why the anonymity?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I was gonna say, can I just, because
Well,
I see Dan's
it's-
listed
I'm
too
looking at
later.
consistency
Right.
throughout the rest of the minutes.
So-
Can you show me?
Can I show you?
Yeah.
Certainly. Page 5, a public thank you from a board member. Page 3, a board member would like to have documented a request from a board member on page 8. The discussion was paraphrased to several bullet points by the board member. all the way
Yeah, I
through
can't
the rest
follow.
of the minutes, there's not a single
Well,
name. So I'm just asking for consistency.
Yeah.
So
Well,
that's fine, if you use my name, then I think we need to use names throughout the whole document. But if you don't think that that's appropriate, then I think we need to be consistent the whole way through.
see, because I was gonna reference, the approval, and like Dan's last name was shared by Ellingson. So I mean, he's mentioned there, but I see what you're saying, Mary, too.
Um,
And so I'm just trying to check too, also through.
I'm sorry, what page?
Dan's is just, it's right after yours, on page the
Okay.
5, in the motion, where he's named by name. But I do see what you were mentioning about board member here, board member there.
Yeah, like on page 3, discussion, I would think that the name should be included rather than excluded.
Right. So we know who's,
I'm just asking, if you do it one way, we should do it consistently throughout the entire document.
and that should be available through video, right? Should we reference?
Yep.
I do like the template, so I'll go ahead.
It's easy to read, yeah.
Yeah.
It's good, and then if we're missing a section, it kind of prompts us to go back and see what happened.
Yep, perfect.
So I'm just kind of looking through the charter school board essential elements of
Yeah.
minutes taking. What I see is the name of the member who introduced a name motion and the seconder. A listing of the speakers on each side of every question. The extent of the content of the debate or discussion is a matter of policy that should be decided by board policy. The action taken regarding reports. The names of those who voted in the affirmative, negative, and those who abstain. It does not mention, so the motion was made by Mary, so it should stay there. As far as the context above. And the discussion part, the explanation. And in that part I can see it. It does have to stay in the decision part.
I don't know if this is just a brand new format, so
Mhm.
I'm hoping it
It's a
can just
valid
be as
question.
consistent
Yeah.
as possible through the whole thing.
I
And if we
can
need
put
to do
that,
more research into it, I'm okay with that.
yep, let's do more research on it. Okay, so we have the revision for title there
Remove Ellingson's name after page 4.
after page 4. We'll research the use of names within the context of it.
And then Heather, what was your edit that you wanted with the policy?
401.1 instead of 401. Page 8, explanation, last sentence. 401.1 is an administrative function.
Any further discussion?
you get the reconvening time?
Yeah, reconvene time on page 6, typo, number 9 on page 10, and then looking into the name. And on page 10, clarify who the report was due to.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Motion passes. All right. On to the board and the administrative reports. The board report, we do want to recognize some visitors. Unfortunately, are not here. But we would like to recognize our lunch monitors and our parking lot attendants. Without them, our school would not function as well as we want it to. So thank you for your time and your service here at MSA. Andy, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
No, definitely, it's really nice to have these people available. It's not a lot of time, but it's so appreciated because the safety of our students is really important, especially during, drop off and pick up. And then also during lunchtime, just to kind of corral and make sure students are being safe, but also cleanliness. So we appreciate all those people for what they do for our school.
Workshop update. We had our board retreat on Saturday, the date eludes me, October 14th, thank you. Our shared message to the community was that we acknowledged our deficits and growth areas as well as our strengths. We learned about each other and who we are, our histories, and how we came to be here. And we appreciated the acknowledgement of when we jumped the line and the reminder to be inclusive, have whole school mindset rather than an individual mindset, have a better understanding of our roles and responsibilities, forecasting long-range planning, and building for our future. Student-teacher contract update was a question that came up at our last meeting that I looked into. Funny enough, as I was in the office last week early, one of the college reps that was coming in to monitor one of our teachers was in the office, so I was able to ask them for the language. And it is provided through the contract with the school that there is a liability to the college, the university, rather than the school that they're attending at. And that's they said it's universal language for all Minnesota schools. Director's report?
Okay, it's gonna be kind of long, there's a lot of stuff to cover real quick. Real quick, facility expansion updates. We had a facility expansion meeting on October 5th. That's gonna be covered a little bit for all of you too, so a lot of it's repeated, so I won't go through that, but that was the minutes from our meeting. I wanna share one thing that we talked about in our facility meeting was the expansion scenarios, so if you wanna pull those up, Caitlin, that'd be great. Let's kind of go through the different scenarios. So if you see them too. So scenario A and B are very similar. Those are based on split sites. So where we would be building a brand new facility, a little bit smaller, this is two options, right? So it's a little bit smaller, we would have 9-12 in the new facility, and our existing site would be a middle school. So that's kind of the scenario for that. Scenario A has a smaller enrollment here than scenario B. So scenario A calls for 150 students per grade level, which would result in us giving up the lease that we have on C and D and just keeping A and B. And you can see what the bond amount would be. It's about almost 20 million. Scenario B is holding on to C and D and having 600 students instead of 450 with 200 per grade level. And you can see the bonding availability is identical, it's the same, because the lease aid and those extra 150 students basically pays for the lease of C and D. So it's kind of a break even. But neither one of those gives us enough bonding to build a facility. I just want to explore that as if we did a little bit smaller scale. Scenario C1 and C2 are identical, except for the funding at the very bottom. But I'll explain those. This is building a brand new site, a 612 building, which would house 1,400 students with 200 in each grade level. And the existing site would be converted into an elementary school, K-5, with 75 students in each grade. So for a combined enrollment of 1,850 students. C1 is basically, we would put in, the school would, out of our general fund, would put 120,000 into the because there's a difference in the bonding, where we would have to, it would be less, because there's 120,000 needs to go from the bonding to the capital improvement fund. So if the school would pay that out of our general fund, that's what that would be. So the difference. So we get a little more bonding by doing that instead of having the bond pay that every month, we get a little more money. Scenario C2 is the same 120, but also that we would take 500,000 per year out of our general fund to add to the lease. So we can get more bonding, as you can see, almost $7 million more by us putting more into it. And in the financials, with 1,850 students, because we have 1,400 in the new site, 450 here, we would be netting the surplus between our expenditures and our revenue would be almost $4 million per year. So we could afford the extra $620,000 out of our general fund to get more bonding capacity. Or else we're back down to about $32 million, which we wouldn't be able to build a site for a K-12, because or 612, because 140,000 is about the bare minimum we can do to make it happen. So that's kind of that scenario. And scenario D1 and D2 is the same with the new site. So 612 in a new site, 1,400 students, but getting rid of A and B here. So we would sell A and B. The difference is, and you can see the amounts are the same in the bottom, but it's a much different situation because this assumes that we're able to sell the existing bonds on this site. So we hold $8 million in bonds right now in A and B. If we can't sell them, that goes against our bonding capacity. If we can sell it, it's great, but it's a tough market right now. A lot of real estate's not moving and bigger things like that. Plus also, whoever's gonna buy A and B most likely is gonna convert it to a school or something else. There's very limited options of what you would use those for. The other piece of it, it also calls for the 120,000 in D1 going from the general fund, and then the 620 from the general fund in D2 scenario. But the situation is we have less surplus with D1 and D2 than we do at C1 and C2 because we have less students. Because we get a per pupil amount from the state on 1,850 students, which is around 9,000 per student. That is more, we're getting more money from the state with 1,850 students than we will with 1,400 students. So that's gonna be a harder swallow to take 620 out of our budget, our general budget, with the scenario of D1, D2 than it is with C2. We don't have to make a decision right now, but I just wanted to share these scenarios with the board. But that's how we can maximize our bonding capacity, is by investing some into our bonds. We can get another $6-7 million out of it, but also where we can.
So I have a
Yes.
question for you.
Yeah.
If we convert this into a K-5,
Yes.
and I walked the long way around today to get to this room. The size of the lockers, I mean, face it, most kindergartners, you could just, 3 of them would fit in one of those lockers outside right now, probably, and looking at them. They're obviously going to need to be much smaller. To put those lockers in and things like that. Have we received a I don't need it to be exact by any means, but an estimate of what it will cost for us to retrofit this to an elementary school, because if you've been in an elementary school, it's everything from the height of the toilets to the drinking fountains to the size of the lockers.
We haven't yet, because right now they're doing plans just for the new site. So right now, that's where our architects and the building company are focusing on the new site right now. Can they build what we need, 140,000 square feet at our threshold of 40 million? Can they do it there? So they're doing that right now, and then we can have them come in and see what would be different here. But I'll address that later, some funding that
Okay.
we'd have for our elementary school. Okay?
Randy, can you explain again, if I missed it, how come the numbers for bonding are the same between C and D, where we still have 450 more kids?
Because, well, it's based on lease aid. The bonding's based on lease aid, it's based on our pupil count, because there's gonna be 1,400 students in the new site regardless,
Okay.
okay? It's on the new site, not this site.
And so
It's not the existing site, yep.
will just keep the same bonding, right?
Correct,
But just leave it
correct.
at being.
Yep,
Can that
the-
work?
yes, that's,
Because we have 600 plus kids now that are high school, middle school, and then in C, there'll be 75 kids each grade, so 450.
correct. We would be, elementary of 450 or 75 per grade level, which allows us to start providing a feeder program to our sixth, or
So-
6, 7,
so that I
8,
get,
12,
right?
but we would still have opportunity for those other elementary schools in Woodbury.
Yep, which I think is fantastic, I like that, but I don't quite follow how.
The bonding
numbers
is
are the
based
same.
on the enrollment at the new site, because that's where we're getting the bonds for these new sites, so it's on that.
But I guess
1,400.
implicit, is there an assumption that the existing bonding with our middle to high school will be transferable to the
Mhm.
quote, old campus of 450 kids?
Mhm.
So I'm surprised that those net out to exactly the same.
Yeah, I was surprised too, I had Baird run that number
Okay.
last week. Yeah.
Okay, I just wanna make sure we're not
And we're,
oversimplifying.
and this is just kind of, yeah, so this is, we don't have to make a decision yet, but it's something we wouldn't have to, we could still go for bond and decide what we wanna do at A and B like down the road too, but it's money that we can start, you know. There's other work that has to be done first.
I have a
Like
question
Baird was-
too.
Yes.
The 620,000, I think you said 500,000, but the 620,000 listed on this form.
Correct, yep.
Is that something we would have to start contributing
No.
day one when they break ground, or is
Not
that?
till full capacity.
Not until full capacity.
Because it phases in from year one to, we have 3 years to get to that 1,400 in the new site. And that's when our full payment would kick in.
So what are we
Of our
having to
lease.
contribute to that?
Pardon?
What do we contribute before that? Is there?
Before that, usually the first year is just the interest.
Interest?
You're not paying the full amount. It phases into that full bond payment in year 3 when you hit your capacity. And that's when we would be putting in that.
So I think I'm probably going back to try to summarize Dan's
Mhm.
question to you. So with the total enrollment, the last 2D scenarios, total enrollment of 1,400,
Mhm.
the bonding numbers are still the same,
Yep.
bonding eligibility numbers, as they are in both scenario Cs with 1850. Correct? That's,
Well, the bonding is on the 1,400, and there's 1,850 as enrollment total. So I can have Bruce come in if you have more questions on a lot of this from Baird to explain. I just wanted to share what they shared with me.
So,
Is it, sorry, is it fair to say, like, how much do we still owe on our bonding?
8 million here.
We currently owe 8, so
Mhm,
I think
correct.
what I'm missing is the 8 is not shown in here.
It would be assumed in here.
Is the
Yeah,
eight
yeah.
being reflected in the 450
Yes,
that's
it
to the
is.
elementary?
Yes.
So
But
the
it's
the
not-
bonding
it's
at the
not
It's
so-
bottom,
not, it's not impacting our
Yeah.
bonding at all.
the bonding at the bottom is specifically for the new site, am I wrong?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're right.
So that's why those numbers are the same,
Mhm.
but
okay,
it's,
Yeah.
it's not based on total enrollment.
No,
No.
it's based on the number of students in that, at
In
that
the
site.
new, okay.
Yeah.
that's
Because
where,
the elementary
Yeah.
numbers
if
would
I'm understanding
Thank you.
this
offset the
right,
8 million.
that's where you're saying that, the 620
Mhm.
is 500,000 from the general fund.
Well, it's all gonna be from the general
Plus-
fund.
The,
Oh.
the other 120 of the lease to the capital improvement
Right.
fund. which is how they get the 620.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that, because I
Yeah,
heard
it's-
500, I was like, but it says
It
620.
would all
Yeah.
come from the general fund, but 120,000 goes to the ABC for the capital improvement fund, and then the other 500 just goes toward payment.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I have one more question. You
Yeah.
said before that we're netting 4 million additional, but I didn't catch the rest.
Yes, once we reach full capacity, 1850 or 1450, we will be, our revenues coming in from the state less our, we've adjusted it with more staff, all those types of things. So our revenues less expenses will be netting about 450 as a, $4 million as a surplus. So that 620,000 we would still be very profitable.
And you got these figures from Baird?
Correct.
Okay. I just wanted to know who
Yep.
prepared all of
Yep.
this.
Bruce Sorensen.
And I also want a point of clarification too, because I think Dan brought up a really good point about the 8 million. In scenario A and B, is that included in that budget? So the 19,000, or 19 million, is that 8 million included in that price? Because at that point, it's not on the new building.
But we still owe it.
Yeah.
And that million is included in, for that part, the new building would bring in absolutely 800 students, so we're bringing in less.
So do we need to add 8 million to the 19 million?
No, because the students in the bottom would pay out of that lease aid money they get.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Okay, and then, just some projects that I'm starting to work on, because this is a process, once we're ready to bond and make a purchase, this is the things that will need to be done prior to all of that, so I've been starting to work on these, projects. And this is something that Liz brought up, if you remember when she came in at the workshop in, was it August or September? It's going so fast. But she brought that in, that there's a market need and demand study that's now a new requirement, both for expansion and additional grade levels, that's required to MDE. So that market need and demand study includes a current and projected demographic information, student enrollment patterns, information on existing schools and types of educational programs currently available. That would be in the 833 district, what other schools are on our site. Characteristics of proposed students and families, availability of properly zoned and classified facilities, what zone that would be appropriate for a school, and quantification of existing demand for a new school or site. So that's the components of that market needs analysis. Some of these are we similar, and some of them we could use some of those that information on other sites. Another thing that has to be done is an application to add grades and enrollment sites. This is required by MDE and by our authorizer, SAM. We already are approved for 2 sites, so we don't have to get that approval, but we would need to add K to 5. Right now, Math and Science Academy is approved as a 612 by our charter, so we'd have to add other grades. So that's something else additional. And then we also have an application for site expansion, and that's both required by MDE and by SAM as well. Plus review and comment, which is due or is required for our bonding. That's done prior to going to bond. So all these things are in the works right now that I've been working on. Probably take about 4 months to work on these projects. There's a lot of data there. Some more information. We had a meeting we do weekly meetings with our project manager, NTH. We had a meeting on Wednesday of last week. Cunningham and Cross Anderson. Cunningham is our architect, Cross Anderson is a building company. They presented plans to construct a 140,000 square foot building at the price per square foot that would meet our bond requirements. So we were talking about the possibility of having to go to a new construction company. Cross Anderson did agree to meet us at what we needed, which is a precast walls and those sliding things that bring us at $200 per square foot, $200 per square foot. So we can stay with our existing, but they did bring in drawings, proposed drawings. Those drawings are gonna go to our expansion facility committee on our next meeting, which is November 2nd. And then we got them kind of late before they get in this packet, but it's gonna go to our committee first, and then it'll come to the board in November to see those, because we're gonna talk about that first. Like, what is the square foot of classrooms and those types of things, so we're gonna see those. Also, they provided a proposed timeline, and it's proposed, it's gonna change, right? So we know that as we go. So they had a proposed timeline, like when do we have to break ground, how long is it gonna take to do each piece of that? It's gonna be about 16 months once we break ground to have completion of a school. We are meeting this upcoming Friday. Bruce is joining our meeting with NTH. We're gonna take the timeline for bonding and join that with the other timeline to get one timeline, and we'll share that with the board in November. The timeline, okay, how long does it take for bonding, all those pieces put together. So align those two timelines. And that'll go to our facility and expansion committee and to the board in November.
So I'm just thinking, in being able to get the occupancy approvals and everything else like that, and working backwards from September of 2025, God, that seems like a long ways away, but it's gonna be here before we know it. We would have to break ground then, so basically we need occupancy by August for staff training and things like that. We would have to break ground by April 1 of 2024.
And it's, the proposed timeline has, it looks like a move-in date of December of 20, whatever. So it would be that 25, 26 school year, it would be over the winter break.
Okay.
But that's proposed. So, and it could change. Because right now, a lot of building companies, they come in and to order, parts and things they need for construction, some things are way out and you have to get way ahead of it. So that's a changing kind of moving target as well.
So how does that work? Because we would occupy this building until December and then move to the new campus. So this would sit.
If that's, well, this, I would, that's kind
We
of,
wouldn't have a K-5 here that first
well, it'd give
year?
us 6 months to kind of get it ready.
Okay,
Right?
yeah, I
That's
mean,
kind
it
of a
makes
positive, too.
sense. So it would be a phased move-in, and our
Correct.
first year, we wouldn't have, the first 6 months in the new facility, we wouldn't have the case.
Right.
That's what I'm trying to get my head around.
If this timeline becomes the actual timeline, that's a possibility, yeah.
Okay.
So we'd
I
have to
just-
kind of see as we go.
Going
But that's
back
just
to
a
this
real
thing.
tentative kind of proposed right now.
Okay, I was just going back to this, because this doesn't look like it's phased in.
So the next thing I want to share is any other questions about any of those updates? Okay. I want to talk about number 2 under the expansion, which is the federal charter school grant. The CSP, it's a charter school program grant. It was available for schools, for charter schools that are starting up to get money from the state. That kind of dried up, unfortunately. There was now more money brought to the federal government, which was distributed to the states, and that process has started up again where there's money available for highly qualified schools or brand new schools. We're considered a highly qualified school. So we would have access to this grant money. So in the process, it's coming by the end of this month. I had a conversation with someone at the charter division of MDE. So it'll be available to go for, and I've done this before at a previous school for this grant. And it's basically for 2 different reasons. One's for expanding and one's for replicating. We're not replicating, we're expanding. So what they are defined as expanding is either you're significantly increasing enrollment, which we are, or you're adding more grade levels. And we're possibly doing that, right? So that's one of our goals. So we do qualify for that expansion piece of the CSP grant. That grant is between $175,000 and $225,000 per year for 3 years. So that could pay for a playground, that could pay for lockers, those types of things. That could come out of that grant money for that. Technology, curriculum, so there's certain specific things you can buy with it, and there's things you can't. You can't pay for salaries, you can't pay, so there's things like that, it's all tangible things, so that money would be available. And I think they'd be very happy if math and science expanded, so I'm sure we'd be a good candidate for that funding. Number 3 in the director's report is our affiliate building company report. We had a meeting on October 3rd. Some of it was on the expansion, but we've also had some work done at MSA. We brought in our insurance company and they checked out our roof, so we have some, our roof being replaced, there's a claim, so that's coming out of our insurance. They started a piece of it over MEA weekend, and it was over Isaac's room, they replaced the roof up there. The rest of the roof will be replaced, the shingles and everything, because they're pretty damaged. Some windows, gutters, those types of things. The week of November 6th, so that's a little update on that piece.
During school time.
Yeah, unfortunately, but we'll do the best we can. Just so we gotta get it done before there's too much ice and snow, but yeah, we'll do the best we can. Hopefully it's not too loud, so. what is
November
it?
7th, they
I
don't
know.
have school, so hopefully.
Yeah, one day we won't have school, the 7th, right? Be conferences, but.
Should it stop raining in your room, Isaac?
Big rain today. So it's gonna be those nail guns, that'll be the loud part, but we'll kind of see, hopefully it's muffled a little bit. For those of you with A, maybe we can find some
Well,
other
with no
space.
school on the 7th, could we request that they put most of their efforts in that day?
Do a lot of it. Well, unfortunately, they'll probably be doing a lot of the tear down at first, right, and then as much as they can. But hopefully they can get a lot done. They have a lot of crews and we can ask, try to really work on as much as they can on the 7th, most of the noise. I had, for number 4, I added my annual goals in there. If you had a chance to go over any questions, I took what you mentioned last time and just kind of personalized them a little bit more as far as what's my role in those different areas. So I don't know if there's any questions on that. So it meets our strategic plan, those 3 different strategic priorities of success for all students, the organization, the facilities. So really, the success for all students is really looking at a continuation of our DEI, our PLC implementation, continue with that, our SST teams, and then also adding in restorative circles and chats, which is something new this year. So continuing the work we've done last year, continuing it into this year and forward. That's kind of our roadmap that we've rolled out at workshop week, is continue working in that to really provide a well-defined curriculum and supports for all students. The organizational thing is really kind of course, our policy development that we've been working on. Our authorizer contract, which I've been working on with Liz. I sent her a couple more things today. The possibility of the school lunch program that says under there, it says if it's deemed to be financially beneficial for MSA. And then the facilities, which of course is our expansion, the bonding, and of course now I added the CSP grant in there as well. I added that in there since that money is now available. So that's some of my annual goals for the upcoming, the current school year. Any questions? Okay, I already talked about the renewal contract, that's one of my goals. I'm working with Liz on that renewal contract as it expires June 30th of 2024. Number 6 is our enrollment as of October 1st. That's a really important MARS report that goes to the state because all of our funding is based on that pupil count. Keep that 664 in mind when I talk about the next thing. Okay, PSEO update. I'm going to talk about this because I know Isaac will be talking about this when we get to our financial report. We had, as you probably have read in the, we have a deficit. More students took PSEO than what we had originally planned, which threw us in a deficit. It's about 150,000. So, and you can kind of see in the report I sent to you. Here's a breakdown from, as you can see, for this current year and the last 5 school years. So you can see for 23-24, we have 12 10th graders, 54 11th graders, and 64 12th graders. Between 11th and 12th graders, it's about 78% of our students are taking some sort of PSEO, whether it's full-time or a class. You can see in the second section underneath, of that 134 PSEO students, which includes 10th, 11th, and 12th graders, those adding, the 12, the 54, and the 64 added together is 130. Of those 130 students, they combine for ADM, average daily membership, of 38 kids. So that's minus 92. So that's that deficit. You can see where it's been, that ADM lost for the last so many years. So we had a huge spike this past year.
Randy, how many of those are full-time versus part-time?
Do you know, Joelle?
Well, I can tell you the 12th grade, 41 of the 64 are full-time PSEO students for 12th grade. For 11th grade, I don't have the exact number, but probably 10 to 12 are full-time PSEO students.
And just to give you a little update, just on kind of how this process, just if you're all kind of how does this all happen, right? So kind of just give you, so last June, I presented, of course, we had our budget for the 23-24 school year was here at our board meeting for approval. And that called for 50 PSEO students in our budget, 40 12th graders, or 10 11th graders. That number is based on a conservative enrollment number. So actually, if you look at the actual enrollment that was in our direct report of 664 students, we budgeted our ADMs at 598, and that's still our budget. That was our budget, was 590. We budgeted for 598, so we budgeted for 66 PSEO kids. So we have a shortfall of about 92 minus 66. So, math teacher.
26.
So 26 students. Yeah. So that's
One question, at one time we had talked about, adding in more classes with block schedule, whatever, to try to attract more students to stay on campus. Is that either not working, or we're not giving enough time for that to work yet?
I don't think there's enough time for that to work, but there's actually in talking, and I'll explain more of this process too, but talking with other schools, PSEO counts are out for many, many schools this year over last year. Actually, talking with Jason Albrecht, Executive Director at Eagle Ridge Academy, his PSEO numbers doubled from last year to this year, and they didn't realize it till August as well. They had no idea it was going to be that many kids. So and even talking with MDE, I know Joelle had a conversation, there's the PSEO numbers are up. And someone thinks more of it's really coming out of COVID, that kids were taking virtual classes, and hey, this isn't quite as bad, so that they're feeling that might have kind of a impact on some of those PSEO numbers, or the students are more conditioned to that virtual learning as before. So I don't have any fact on that, but that was an assumption that someone said. But basically how the process works, so that's where there's a shortfall there. So we plan our budget, there's for 66, 664 minus 598. But we have more than that, so 92, not 66. So in how this kind of works is students are able to start registering for PSEO classes in June. They fill out the form. Well, they actually register with the college, okay, in June. They can start in June, but some will do it in July, some do it in August. But it starts in June. They fill out the form. It's uploaded and sent to our high school counselor. Our high school counselor takes the forms and completes their MSA schedules, which occurred in August. According to our PSE numbers that we received in July, we were on track. The first time that we had an actual ADM report was our first MARS report, which is sent, the first one's the end of August. And that submission showed there was 31 more students than what we received in July. So when we were on track in July, we didn't have any updates to any of the reports until that MARS submission, which showed a lack of 31 more kids that weren't reported in July that were actually signed up for a PSEO.
Did you look historically at when students signed up for PSEO? So if you were on track in July, wouldn't you make a guess as to how many students would additionally?
Well, at that
apply for
time, we didn't
PSEO?
know there was an issue until they had signed up, right?
Say that again?
We weren't aware there was an issue as of July because some of them haven't signed up for PSEO yet. Or we didn't have the schedule, the submissions yet because they went to the counselor and they haven't been put into a schedule yet.
But looking historically at where numbers were in July.
And historically, we've been right on track for the most part.
So all of the students have done PSEO by July?
No. What I'm saying is, we had budget, we have 66 students right budgeted for
Yeah.
PSEO. And we were on track, we knew there was
Yeah.
more coming, but as we were still under that amount yet in July. Well, we ended up, what did we say, 26 short, we were about 31 short, so we were right on that cusp where we're getting there, so, yes.
I think what Teacher Lozano is asking is, did you look at historical late registrations?
And I can ask Joelle, because she used to do this. She was, just so we know, so. Joelle was our MARS coordinator, if anybody doesn't know who Joelle Pazek is. She's our MARS, but she used to do all the scheduling and all the PSEO scheduling. Until 2 years ago, when our interim director changed it from Joelle to our high school counselor. So she used to do it, and she can probably answer some of those questions probably better than I can, because this is really your arena.
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, would you
talking
please?
about it.
I think that's the
So
questions.
I would say that we would know the plans the way we used to do scheduling two plus years ago. I would know the 11th and 12th grader plans by May, like 80% of the students. The other 20%, I would follow up during the summer if they had a vacant schedule or things were missing or we haven't received their PSEO schedule. Also, just so you know as well, that up till 2 years ago, the high school counselor and I were in the same building for 5 years together, so her and I collaborated a lot together and worked together to find out the plans for the students. So there's been a little bit of a, physical disconnect the last 2 years as well as a shift in duties, so but yes, we could come up with plans a little early, but we're still gonna have a percentage of students we don't know about. Just depends.
When I look at this, and I look at last year, we had 35 juniors that were in PSEO. If we take the increase from juniors to seniors that go PSEO, the year before, the juniors to seniors were up about 27 kids. This last year, we went from 35 to 64, that's 29 kids. I'm not seeing why this should be a surprise, because I would think that the 35 kids that took PSEO last year as juniors would continue on as PSEO as seniors, and they'd bring some of their friends along with it. I also think, I don't know, but I know some parents, and high school kids were very confused and very concerned about how they were going to make it work going from the U of M and a class that's in person in the morning, but they had to be back here for this class in the afternoon, and then they were going back to the U. And I think it's difficult. When you look at higher ed classes, many of them are Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday classes. I don't know that our current block schedule is necessarily helping us in this aspect, because you're asking a kid who was looking at going part-time PSEO and figured he or she would go Monday, Wednesday, Friday, they'd have classes on campus, Tuesday, Thursday, they could do that. Now we're doing a Monday, Wednesday, Friday 1 week, Tuesday, Thursday the next week for our block schedule. They're going to miss class. No matter how they look at those college classes, they're going to miss them if they're in person. And many of the in-person and even synchronous classes have a attendance policy. That's part of your grade. You have to be in attendance, which is only fair to your other classmates who are paying tuition to be in those classes as well. So I get it from a college standpoint. I wonder, and I know there are solutions coming up in the finance committee, but I wonder if one of the solutions we don't look at is going forward, do we change how our block schedule is so that it's Monday, Wednesday every week versus Tuesday, Thursday, and then every other Friday? I don't know, it's a possible solution, but I look at this and I can see where it would be very difficult.
If I can just bring back Randy to the PSEO stuff, obviously, this is gonna be something moving forward that the kids are still gonna be interested in.
Yeah.
We cannot have these deficits, and we know that. And so we have to figure out whether it is the distance of the buildings, we gotta figure out how we can talk and reduce, whether it's coming down or getting it through. And one thing I keep thinking about is the counselors have had to know, like, these are the kids talking, who are the ones getting in? So is that where we lost it? Is it kids, like Mary was saying, maybe I will or maybe I won't, and all of a sudden they hopped on. But we have got to reduce this. Is there a requirement where we can get these kids kind of locked in sooner? Is there a form? Is there, like, we only take so many? Because like Mary said too, and she brings up a good point. If at the 10th grade level, if there's 60 taking it, those 60 probably are gonna be looking to expand that by their 11th grade year. So our numbers are gonna continue to grow, which means our funding is gonna be continued to separate. And right now, if we're talking about expansion, we need some of those numbers to stay here versus being shipped out. So what can we do, or how can we change, or how can we make them more going? And even my daughter's at Eastridge and she's taking PSEO and they're making it work on however they're doing their schedules.
And that's something we talk about, is putting a plan in place so this
Yeah.
kind of stuff doesn't happen again.
And
It's
that's-
pulling in
yeah.
the Joels and the counselor and the administration and kind of, you
Yeah.
know, how can we make sure to stay on top of these so this doesn't happen?
I just want to ask the students real quick too. PSEO for you guys, what are you guys thinking, what are you guys hearing? Are more students going for it, are they not?
I mean, definitely like more people are going towards PSEO now as time moves on. Like over the years, like the numbers have grown a lot, and just the reason is just kind of preparing themselves for the years ahead, and also getting through the classes faster, just because it's one semester versus the whole year.
Yeah.
And more people are getting on that shit just because people are talking about it, telling each other it's beneficial. You're gonna get more classes done, so it's just.
So like, I'm almost hearing like our senior class is gonna start to reduce, because a lot of that's gonna be going off, and I don't blame you guys, because if someone's gonna pay for me to get some college credit,
Why not?
bring it on, I don't have to pay for it.
The
So,
flip side of that, and I'm speaking as a parent of a child who did not do PSEO and totally did AP classes. She walked into her freshman year of college with 36 credits, college credits. That's a second semester sophomore. I don't know how many credits you guys are going to go into.
My brother, he got his associates.
Yeah.
That's really, it's awesome.
And you look at that and it's like, I don't know that we necessarily emphasize the value of the AP classes and staying on campus.
Gotta be careful with APs because they don't always transfer.
No, they don't. Well, PSEO doesn't always transfer either.
Well, I mean, I know the one thing about PSEO, the downside towards MSA is that you're losing money, like, right, for the kids
Right.
that are going off to PSEO. And I mean, you see like the senior class, how like 94%, almost like, there's only 10 students who are taking classes here, right?
Right.
The rest of us are away at PSEO. But also at the same time, our mission and vision, we also say that we try and get the kids ready for college. So, I don't know, I guess that's something you have to take into consideration at the same time. And it really is up to the said student, whether they want to go that route of PSEO or stay in the school doing, schoolwork. If that's if that's what works for them, then that's totally their thing. And I know MSA has been moving towards CIS, that kind of route, but PSEO.
You have to have the staff for it though.
Yeah.
And that's what we're working on, so it takes time. What I'm looking at this data, I'm questioning, why do we have to look at a specific student count rather than looking at the percentage? If you look at the percentages, 50 to 55 is pretty average for the class size. As we look at expansion, those numbers are gonna increase. As we review the 5-year forecast that's been projected, we still looked at those numbers and it set our budget up to fail. So why are we not looking at percentages over a specific number? And why are we pointing the finger at our high school counselor?
I'm not pointing at it.
Well,
That's what I heard. Why are we pointing the
I
finger
guess
at
my other
her?
question is I heard the personnel changed, but I didn't hear that the process changed. So my question is yeah, we changed, Joelle's no longer doing it, it's Emily doing it. Did something else change? Are numbers not, I I know that, Joelle's a 12-month employee. I don't know what Emily is at this point. I know she had been a 10 or 11-month employee. She was more, I don't know if she still is or not.
What I
If
heard
that's
changed is the
changed.
lack of communication and the lack of advocating for what needs to be done.
I keep going back to what Teacher Lozano said because I actually thought it was very smart of you to mention. Did you look at the historical change in enrollment after that July date? The one, the kids, historically, how many of these kids come back and start shuffling around? I don't want to take this class, I want to take PSEO here, I want to drop this, I want to add this.
I see my schedule for this
The
year.
drop and add, you know?
Kendall, just to poke at that a little bit, would that have changed anything? Because I think we have, so I'm just looking at seniors, 93% of the seniors have chosen. So whether we know it now or we knew it last month, still 93% chose that. So I think that's the question, not whether we knew in July or we knew in August. I think there is a potential that we could have saved a month in the discussion we had last month. But the bigger problem is how many students we have signing up for PSEO.
We could have put a more conservative number
In
into
the budget?
Into the budget.
Back in June.
In
No,
June?
yeah, when's the budget finalized? May, June?
I don't think we have to be careful with history after the fact, right? Because if I look at my numbers, 50, 40, 56, I'm not gonna put down 78 in June. You know what I mean? I'm not gonna say, all of a sudden, we're gonna go to 80. I think it's easy for us to look at it and say, it's 78, how can we be
But
so
to
far off?
go from 50 to 60 to 33.
Yeah.
Yeah, the drop.
This is a
Why would you
33%
drop?
projection.
Where's
Why
the
would you go
33?
less?
This is part of the finance committee meeting.
So I guess that's a question
Because
for you,
that was-
Mr. Vetch.
this
Why would you
information
go
is not
less?
on the
Why would you go
piece.
down? If we are historically 50, is that right, Joelle? 50 to
60.
50,
it says.
50 to 60?
Yeah.
Then why would you do 33 with our projected growth?
Can I
With
ask-
having more?
Who does the budget?
And we're responsible for it, yeah. we
Well-
approve it.
Who puts it together? Randy's not the treasurer, he's not the
Well, I'm-
Kraus Anderson.
No, it's not Cross Anderson. We work with Bergen.
Or Bergen.
Now it's Creative, whatever the name is, but they.
So I would think Bergen and everybody, because I'm just looking at this, and looking at the increase from 11th to 12th grade. We have seen anywhere from a 37% increase from 11th grade one year to the seniors the next year, to a 56% increase. This last year, it was a 42% increase from 11th graders to 12th graders going to PSEO. The biggest increase that we saw that we haven't seen previously is the number of juniors, sophomores to juniors increasing this year. Because that's a 64% increase. We've never seen that big of an increase going in our junior year. So as much as I hear that, I think there's some responsibility that doesn't just fall on the counselor, that doesn't just fall on the director, but it falls on the process in making that budget, in looking at these numbers and coming up with the best possible estimate. And it's an estimate, we don't know. But when I look at this, we saw a 42% increase from juniors to seniors going to PSEO. That's not the problem. It's the problem of the sophomores to the juniors that went. And that would, nobody could have guessed that, nobody could have estimated that, because that was the highest increase we've ever seen.
To answer your question, Randy is responsible for the projected budget. He does work with Bergen, I forget their new name.
Creative planning.
Creative planning. That is his job, that is his responsibility. What I'm looking at, and I'm hearing quite across the table, is if we look at the percentages more, we would have been more accurately projecting this outcome. Looking at, because the 50 students for the 11th and 12th grade came out to about 33%, as you saw in the finance report. Had we projected, looking at the percentage rather than the actual number, we would have been closer to 50 rather than 78, which I believe the finance committee, that's a high percentage right now. I do think we need to get into the finance report to continue this discussion. But Randy, you still need to finish your communication part of this.
And I just
so.
want to say, I'm not blaming our high school counselor. I don't mean it to sound that way. And I take responsibility. It was a flawed situation where we have somebody who works a 10-month contract who doesn't work in the summers to have to unschedule. So it was not a good system to use, so. Anyway, last couple of things. One, real quick, is just a communication updated the log to include some of the some issues that were brought up last month, and we added some of our non-native English-speaking families. How are we communicating to them? So it's in there. We have our website has a translate, as does Skyward, which is our student information system, also has translate services. We also use a translation service for families that need a interpreter. And we did contact families that have identified as English not being the spoken language at home, and we have one family that will need interpreting for the conferences coming up. And then the last thing is there's a hiring update. There's some coaches that aren't on there yet because they haven't signed their contracts yet, so we're getting that, and that'll come in November for winter activities. So that's everything for me.
I have a just very quick question about the communications for the interpreting.
Yes.
Are they gonna be in person or video?
It's a video.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can request over 300 different languages, which is really nice for that service. Okay.
Isaac, your finance report?
Yes, so we'll continue the conversation. So here's the finance report. Last time we met in September, we had an anticipated yearly surplus of about $50,000. Now we have a big difference, so the working budget deficit for the year is a deficit of about $152,000. So we've already talked about when we met in September, kind of the big difference is we had a projected average daily membership of 598. That was just a projection. As we get now into actual numbers, we have a difference of 25. So we have a current average daily membership of 573 right now. So there were some 6th through 10th graders that there are more right now than we had in the projections, but the big difference is the 11th and 12th grade numbers went down, mostly because of that PSEO situation. One other thing is salaries and benefits did increase some from projected budget to actual budget, but the biggest reason for this is this PSEO difference. When we get to our cash on hand, we still have projected days cash on hand of 103, and we need 60 to meet minimum bond covenants. And then what we do need to investigate more and look at now is the projected debt service coverage ratio. Projection right now is 0.81, and we want above 1 to meet minimum bond covenants when we still have that above 60 days cash. So some things we're kind of looking at is, do we have more revenue coming in? We do have $42,000 from an emergency connectivity fund. That one we can count on. We don't have the exact timing, but we have an ETA of January or February of that right now. We have this big employee retention credit, but I think when we've talked with creative planning and talked about this one we can't count on when it's coming in. So this is over $500,000, $640,000 from this employee retention credit, but we have an unknown date even for the fiscal year for that. So that's a lot of money, but the timing is unknown. We've talked about right now we're planning to be careful with spending, so things that haven't already been budgeted for this year will probably not happen. Unneeded expenses, things like that. And then I think this brings us to our big decision is what do we want to do? So the two options right now is, do we want to get a revised budget with a deficit of 0, or do we want to let this go for now? When we talked about this with people who have seen this before and with creative planning, the recommendation is to just carefully monitor the budget until later in the year, December or January, and reassess the situation here, knowing grants are possible, knowing that other things could change too. And that is the current recommendation, but we need to talk more about that recommendation and decide what to do as a board.
It doesn't seem like a plan, if you will. I mean, to have these grants just maybe come, it seems, I would feel more comfortable. And in my experience, I've never seen this go so far negative that I can recall. So I think we do need to figure out a way to get that kind of closer back to zero as the plan, and then grants are kind of like the bonus.
And then-
That's how I feel.
I agree, thinking about it more. So I kind of what I'm hearing, I guess, from creative planning, those, we don't need to officially do it till,
We don't need to rush. I
Later
think,
in the
Because we
year?
have cash, right?
but we need to have a plan.
Yeah, I don't agree with Dan, but I think we should have someone burning their tail on grants to see if we can try to supplement, because what's the worst case scenario? We get a grant, and now we have some too, so then the stuff that we've put off, now we can re-enter. So I think the grant, we still should look at, but again, plan with no changes. It's like if we're gonna go on vacation, right? If we don't all of a sudden have the money, we're not going on vacation. So what are we gonna do to try to, and go from there and get, so. My concern is if we operate in a negative and we do status quo, it's gonna hit us real quick, kind of deal, right? And I mean, I'm pretty sure the teachers are pretty strapped right now, and so when you tell them they can't have something, or we need something fixed, that's demoralizing, because they need to do their job.
And like Isaac said, the 62.5, we have the line item for technology will all come from the grant, so that 65 can now be put back into our budget.
So what, does that have to be used for technology though?
Yep, and we already spent 42,000 of it, which will be reimbursed from the technology grant we're gonna receive,
Gotcha.
which will be a little bit more. That some of it will be used in last fiscal year, some's in this fiscal year. So we'll be able to take that 62, wipe it to zero, so that helps us on that side of the deficit piece, but use
Yeah.
our technology line item from there, so.
So, I mean, that's what my thing would be, is we have someone burning back on the grants, and we tread lightly on moving forward, if we wanna save.
Another thing was we talked about in our fundraising committee, which is our give to the max, is if we had a goal of 60,000, and that was before this meeting too, is to use that for activities, maybe teacher need, things that we're already using our general fund for, to reimburse that. So between those two, that's about $120,000.
So is it
I'm
possible-
struggling.
Is
I'm
it
struggling.
possible to come back? Sorry, Will.
Yeah. My understanding of the 42,000 that we're getting from the emergency connectivity fund is money based off what we've already spent. So we're getting reimbursed that 42. You said that money is in hand. We have that, the 42,000.
The 42,000 we already spent.
But I think you referenced it, that we had that money. It was already,
It's coming in that technology grant. which
and we don't know
it's
when that's
covered.
gonna be.
Yep, and then we'll reimburse the 42 out of the technology fund, and then what's remaining in that fund will come out of the grant and not out of our general fund, because we budgeted for 62,000 for that technology line item,
So we'll spend the rest of the 62.
if needed.
Okay.
Because we spent 42 of the 62,
Yeah,
if it's
yeah.
needed. Because, a projector goes out, you need a new bulb, things happen technology-wise, a smart board goes out, a laptop.
I guess my question, we have listed a 152 deficit, but I'm hearing different numbers, so is it less? Are we, do we need to come up with 100 or 50?
So right now it's at 150, but things could still change in either direction. There still could be more PSEO students or something like that. There still could be more students added. There could be, students who unenroll. So there still could be changes. This is based on the report.
So is it okay for the finance team then to kind of come back and say, here's what I guess maybe the whole board needs to decide, but if we want to get that closer to zero, what would that look like? We need to give here, we need some more money there, whatever that is. But that would be helpful for me at least to
Because that
understand.
152 is our working budget, so it could go
Could go up and down.
up, down, whatever it might be as we go through the year, but we do need to address it. It's not okay to where it's at, we have to look at other ways too, like Brian said, whether it's a grant like the technology or whatever it might be, other options, or we can adjust here and there.
And I guess my point with the grant is I think these are fantastic and we should do it, but it feels a little bit out of our control. We will apply for it and we will try to get it. We don't know when it comes or how much is coming. So that's why it doesn't feel like a plan to me. It just feels like a bonus.
And
So I love them. I just don't know that that's what we should
Those are-
have baked in, is money just flowing in, you know, at different times.
Well, it's money, the money could be earmarked as
Yeah.
well too. So it's great you have this, but now it's gotta be put toward this very specific thing, so I.
To
I'm
that
not going
point, I think it needs to be reiterated that the employee retention grant was already promised to the staff.
Yes.
So that 600,000, that's already promised. It was already been communicated to the staff that this was gonna happen. I mean, we did the whole, salary revision last year, cut off the lanes, and then we were promised that this would help buy out other lanes for the retention of teachers. I've lost my thought where I was going with this. My question to you, Randy, then is how do you propose this be resolved? Because you are the person who is responsible for the budget.
One, like we talked about, we have the technology grant, which will, it's for technology, so when that money comes, that's that. We also look at our fundraising efforts to address this as well. So the efforts of our goal of 60,000, so together that's 120, which leaves us about 30,000 short. We look at other ways in the budget. There are some things that, you know, looking at, I mean, it's just a year that I've been here, so what other areas we have to look and see. There's some things we may not need, if as long as it doesn't impact instruction, or there's some other areas that we can reduce in some of these areas. For instance, we give all staff professional development money, we didn't use it all last year. There was about $20,000 there that we didn't use, that went back into our general fund. And we gave some staff additional, but we don't have to because they're only allocated, whatever it's $1,000. Don't give the additional, use it for our general budget, right, our general fund. So there's some money right there that hasn't been used in the past that could go towards, and there might be other areas too, when we look at our budget. Between those three right there, those are three pretty big ones.
How do you ensure what your monitoring is done equitably?
Well, we have to make sure it's first off is what is it impacting learning and students in the classroom, you know, what's happening in the classroom. That's the first thing we don't address, that we don't touch. What impacts student learning, curriculum, instructional materials, those types of things have to, you know, be available and accessible. But what other things can we do? When we look at some of the other line items that we may not need. So we'd have to sit down as a team, go through some of these items where there is a difference and look at, is this something that we can reduce that amount of whatever we budgeted for? Maybe we don't need the full amount, we can reduce it somewhat, right? A little bit here, a little bit there, all adds up.
So we just chase the number to get in the black again.
Well, either you bring in more revenue, which is kind of hard at this point, or else you decrease your expenditures.
Well, we're a charter school, so we
Right.
can't levy or bond,
You
so
can't,
our
right.
income is fixed. That's why we budget conservatively.
Right.
What's your plan to communicate this to the staff? Because they're the ones who are directly impacted by this.
Well, I think we have to have a special meeting to share that once out of our board meeting. I think it's important to bring them up to date, what's happened and where we're at, and what's our plan going forward.
And the follow-up question from that is, will staffing be affected? Could staffing be affected?
I don't think it needs to be unless it's, you know, something, there's, all of our EAs are all sped, so that's not, there's no savings there because you're reimbursed 96% of sped, so that's a very small amount, so we don't need to address any of that. Teachers are all needed, I mean, they all have plenty of students, we can't let go of anything there. So we have to see, are there any hourlies or anything that we may not need? I don't know, that's something we can look at when we address and come back in December and January and see where we're at with everything, if we have to make any of those decisions. Right now, no, it doesn't.
I know
See
in
if
the
there's other areas
past,
first.
I know in the past as a parent, in the back to school supplies, we have needed to bring in 3 reams of copy paper and 3 or 4 things of paper towel and Kleenex boxes, and none of us complained, it was just expected, that's what you did. I was surprised this year when some of those things weren't on
Well,
it.
the reason they weren't is if you went underneath our stage, we have years' worth of Kleenex and paper towels, so we don't need any more.
Right.
Because there's
But
so
I
much,
look
but
at
it
this
can
and
help
I-
in other areas, oh, yes.
Right, but I look at this and I haven't gone through and added up how much we spent. But in just 1 month, it's like paper. Okay, we're spending a lot of money on paper when parents in the past have donated that.
And I think we still had some coming in this year, and we can ask for more though.
Yeah, I mean, it's one way, it seems small, but if we
It
can
all adds
find
up.
those different ways, and again, pre-COVID, that was a given. You brought in reams of paper, you know,
Well,
And
talking
because
about it.
people did that, and we were so fiscally conservative, we were successful. We have like the model budget.
right.
So we were able to build that savings, right? Because everybody gave a little bit. So I think the hard thing now is to have the deficit and to still ask of our community and not be building, especially going into expansion. So, but yeah, that's part of the lean that we're gonna have to do.
We're talking about a different time too, pre-COVID, post-COVID as well. And we also have to take into consideration some of the context that may be affecting our families with this too, in terms of student loans went back into effect.
Yes, they
And
did.
there's some of these other outside features that, it's not that these are bad suggestions, but people may not be in a situation where they could get where they normally would. And that
And
sucks, but we gotta think about
teachers
that.
currently have donors choose and Amazon wish lists on what I believe is on our website that we're asking of our community instead of administration right now. I'm not saying like anything about the budget, I'm just saying like, we are asking
Yeah.
things of our staff, but I mean, I guess we could use more tissues.
I mean, our budget has to be based on income.
Yes,
Yeah,
Like that's,
yeah.
yes.
everything else is kind of like Dan said, maybe a bonus, but.
So right now, the recommendation from the finance committee is to monitor the budget until January with the knowledge, not counting on, but with the knowledge that we could potentially receive 2 grants to help offset. Granted, they've been delineated already, and plan to better forecast for next year so that we do not have a repeat of this current situation. We're gonna ask, we'll probably have to motion to accept that recommendation. I do have further question on this. My question is, January is around the corner. We're still operating in $120,000 debt, looking at this number here. We're now operating in the red. How does that impact expansion? How does that impact our bonding? Because now we're gonna have to go into our reserves to offset this debt. I think that's a very important question that we need to consider right now, and we do need an answer. So my recommendation would be for Randy and the finance committee to explore what that deficit does.
At what point do we need to turn over our financials? At what point is our deficit going to be known?
Well, it's
When we
known
go
right
to
now,
bonding?
'cause this is
I
public.
mean, when we go to,
Yeah.
when we go to bonding?
We have the bond covenant agreements, right, which I think is what you're saying, how many days of cash and all of that. So I think until we hit that point, I believe we're still okay, but we're going in the wrong direction, right? So we need to fix it. I'm not saying we gotta pass, but we have so much in our general fund, you know, that we can afford to not say it has to happen this week, it could happen in a month or 2, we can come back. Does that answer your question, Heather? So I think
Yeah.
we have rules that'll kick bad things into effect if we start getting
Right.
in those, but we're not there yet. We still have some time before. Because this is an annual And annually, we will be 150,000 down, correct?
That's the
And we
projection.
have millions in our general fund.
And we got that extra 170,000, which went into last year, but that went into our fund balance, which was the additional lease payment that we received at the end of the year, which came in was 170,000. It's not available to us this year, but it did go into our general fund as an increase over last year, so FYI.
And I'm not, I mean, we have very specifics we've talked through tonight, but philosophically, we've been talking the same thing for the last 4 or 5 years, which is we need more kids in order to fund the raising costs. So this is just, I'm not giving a pass to anyone here because we're responsible for what we have, but we do need to expand, right, to bring that revenue up. And so we're lucky that we have been able to save up as much as you mentioned over these past years that we have to be able to kind of weather through this until we can expand. One other comment along the same lines, just to make sure that when we're doing the budget for our expansion, I mean, 90% of our seniors weren't on campus, so what number are we using in there? And if we
Yeah,
use,
that has to be, we're actually meeting with, actually, not Jenny Abs, but Nick Tanger is now taking over. I mean, Jenny's just has too much on her plate, so we're meeting and revising our budget. So those, I noticed too, Wanda, what you said too, is like that forecasted budget, it kept the same amount of kids on there, 40 and 10, throughout 10 years, even though we're growing the 1,400, which that needs adjusted, so.
Yeah, as
that
we were
whole budget,
expanding
yeah,
student
and that stayed the
bodies,
same.
the PSEO number stayed the same.
So
That
that's
was not a true
that's what
reflection
you
of
mentioned.
our
And
budget.
that's where it needs to be a
Yeah.
percentage, so we'll adjust that whole budget, we're looking at some different scenarios, we're meeting with them this week on Thursday, so we'll have that, we're going over our scenarios and we'll adjust the whole budget process as we go forward.
And I
otherwise
was
we'll have a
gonna
problem.
say, to Dan's point, we have 120 10th graders this year, I think is what I remember. If we use the same percentage for PSEO next year, we're gonna have the largest junior class we've MSA has ever seen, if we maintain all of our kids. And
It's better to assume we are, because then we're more
Mhm.
conservative. on our
assume that
budgets.
we retain all of them and assume that our percentages stay the same, but that number is gonna go up.
And it's better to over-predict our PSEO, because then we can backfill in our younger classes.
Yeah.
So if we even count our part-time PSEO as just full-time, that's gonna help offset that quite a bit.
Yep.
Can we, just like we have a return, an intent to return, as a part of that intent to return form, can we ask if you have a 10th, 11th, or 12th grade next year, are they planning on going PSEO, full-time or part-time?
I think just yes or no.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, or
And
yes
then
or
we
no.
can always follow up with them and see as we go. I think someone
Yeah,
brought
that's
that up
one,
in their
that's one
finance
thing we
meeting.
brought up, and like, I was a 10th grade advisory teacher last year too, so you're around when students are signing up for classes, so I think even just talking to the kids is often what it takes. You're not gonna get super accurate, but
Get a better idea.
you're gonna get a better idea early in the spring. So as we get to the spring, we need a better plan, but right now, this is what we have
Yeah.
to deal with first.
And I would also hope that more students would know their next year's schedule sooner than they did this past year, because there's such a delay with the block scheduling and getting that out. I think hopefully we're better prepared for moving
Well,
forward.
and how that block schedule is gonna look. Are we
Mhm.
gonna continue to do Monday, Wednesday, Friday, one week, Tuesday, Thursday the next? Or are we going to modify it in some way?
And with that too, I think we have to ask our students, you know, and we didn't really know the impact of block scheduling to PSEO. Did it did it not? We don't know, and I think that's something we
That
can
might be a
ask.
we
good,
could
that
include
might
that
be a
in
good
the-
data point to
Yeah.
get.
Yeah,
for
we can
current
include that in the
policies.
climate survey
Right.
mid-year.
So I'm looking at that thinking it might be one option to find a better idea. And to your point, yes, communicating that and communicating what that block schedule. I needed to set an appointment, a regular appointment. And so I was waiting for that, going, what's this gonna look like? For my kid.
Yeah, I mean, like, when I was, really, obviously we talk a lot with each other when considering like our PSEO schedule, and I feel like a lot of the stuff that attributed to signing up late was learning about the new block schedule, just because people were deciding, do I want to sit in this class for an hour and 20 minutes, or how long ever the block is now, versus I can go to a class for twice a week and kind of finish faster. So I feel like that attributes a lot to it too, kind of how the block schedule changed now, because I feel like a lot of people were content with how the schedule used to be versus now, just because of the length and what they can get from each side. So I feel like that definitely contributed to kind of how it played out for this year. The numbers, look at the numbers.
That also has to, another aspect that has to do with that is kind of the tradition of MSA. I've been here, Josh has been here since 6th grade, and kind of how we always done it has been normally, right, with like the 7-day schedule, and then Thursdays and Fridays we would go to block days, and then like when it got changed up all of a sudden, I think like it kind of took everybody aback and was wondering, okay, how is this whole entire new thing gonna play out for us? And I know that was definitely one of my main reasons why I switched full-time to University of Minnesota, was because of the new change in the schedules. It just wouldn't work out for me. Kind of, I know how Mrs. Yap was talking about that, you know, driving to and from classes like just like this, it wouldn't be like very feasible for many students, so, yeah.
And one thing we need to answer now before we move on is, as we make the plan, who's doing that? So what's the board involved in, what's the finance committee involved in, what's administration involved in, what's the executive director involved in, what's creative planning involved in, seem like the main people involved. So what is everyone involved in as we make our potential plan?
I think the feedback from the board is that we're not happy with a deficit of 150. I mean, if you said 5,000 or whatever, I think we're not gonna care, but 150 is a noticeable number. So I think, I can't speak on behalf of the board, but what I'm saying is that I'd like to see a number closer to 0 as the plan. Right? So that would be the board's role. I don't think it's the board's role to say it's this person or it's this, you know, line item or this, you know, credit card spending. I think that needs to come from, you know, administration. Is that right, Randy?
I agree, yes.
And you know, committee input is so important, but committee is advisory,
Right, I think,
Yeah.
right?
I think
Not a
we can,
decision
that
maker.
admin can work with creative planning, really to kind of get that down and bring that to the finance committee, to the board.
But I wanna agree on what Dan said earlier of asking for money is not a way to lower the deficit. And I think just keeping that in mind, like, yes, look for more money, and also how do we
Right.
work with what we
That's
have.
not a guarantee,
Yeah.
right, exactly.
I guess my question would be, would it be too much to ask for a projection by our next workshop from Randy on how this deficit will be managed? So that we have that time from our workshop to our meeting to really look into it. And I mean, at this time, I mean, we have to monitor it. There's nothing we can do outside of that at this moment. But I think we need to know what the nitty-gritty is. We need to know, what's this gonna cost the school? What's it gonna cost our staff? What's it gonna cost, first and foremost, our students? And what they're gonna lose out in.
I think that probably should have come at the same time.
I agree.
That probably should have come today.
So our motion.
So do we need to change the
Can I-
motion to advise?
What may I read your questions?
I just have a quick question on your meeting minutes.
Yeah.
On the top of page 4, it says, "At the October BOD meeting, the committee acknowledged that the finances will need to be approved." This is the October board meeting.
I think it
I'm
was
not
a
sure
misphrase. So
if you-
we, as the finance committee, acknowledged that us right now at our October board meeting will need to approve minutes, and will need to approve the finance reports.
Yeah, because the question is, I mean, we're not happy with this
Right, no,
deficit.
it was just very confusing as you
Yeah.
read that, because I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, at the October board meeting, the committee acknowledged that the finances will need to be approved.
Mhm.
Okay, page?
Yeah, because we can't,
Is
I don't-
it
we can't
the
just dismiss
committee-
it, we have to
no, but
approve it.
Is it the committee acknowledged that the finances will need to be approved
Mhm.
at the October BOD meeting?
Yeah.
Which makes more sense.
Yeah,
I'm like, how did we, are you do you see what I was?
yeah,
I'm like,
so maybe just add that.
Yeah, it's
just
Yeah.
change the wording there because it sounds a little odd and is a little muddled.
So regardless of what it is, we have to approve it.
Right.
Yeah.
But we have to have a plan moving forward.
Mhm.
Are you ready to collect a motion?
Ready.
So collectively, we could say, we motion to approve the finance reports. Please help me out here.
And then do we want, so it seems like the thing that was added is, do we want the plan by at least the next board meeting?
I would say the workshop, so that way we have some time to review it, more time than this time.
Or-
Yeah.
So with
With the addition of a plan for
review,
review, financial.
a plan to amend the deficit.
By the November 14th
Yes.
workshop.
Will you read that for us?
Motion to approve the finance reports with the addition of a plan to amend the deficit by the November 14th workshop meeting.
By the executive director.
We can't really amend the deficit.
Yeah, that's what I was
Reduce,
thinking.
sorry.
Like
Reduce.
that
Plan
line
to
item is
reduce,
not
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Reduce.
Plan to
Address.
Address.
So are we
Address.
asking for an amended budget? Are we asking for a new financial outlook?
That could be the plan.
I mean, I don't want
Yeah.
us to start, or I don't want us to, you know, if we get into a debt, if we start feeling desperate, I don't want us changing line items.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Just,
Well, and if an amended budget is the plan. then
the only
that's
thing that can
fine.
overcome the deficit is more income,
Mhm.
right? Because it was a miscalculation of income. So
Were you saying something?
what are
Dan?
we asking?
Well,
for?
no, I was just gonna say that I think, we have to be careful on what our role of the board is, right? I think the role is basically saying that we're not happy with this large deficit. So please come back and get it closer. I don't know that we're saying it needs to be zero, but it needs to be closer. I don't know what that number is, but it's less than 150. And then I think the line items should be, here's how, Randy, how we plan to address this deficit is these things. And it doesn't impact students, it doesn't impact teachers, doesn't, like, here's how we're gonna do it. So I think that's the right differentiation between the roles, so it's not like we're gonna say, no, don't do 4 and do more of 5. That would be overreaching for the board, I think. But we're just saying we can't continue to operate with the planned deficit. So address it. I think that's right. Come back with that plan to address it.
So,
Okay,
to
yeah.
address the deficit.
Motion to approve the finance reports with addition of a plan to address the deficit from administration by the November 14th
Yeah,
workshop
I think
meeting.
that sounds good.
Yes.
Second that.
So I made the motion.
Yeah, second motion.
Or, Isaac, do you care to make the motion?
I make that
Should I
motion.
make the motion?
Yeah. I think it needs to come from you. Seconded by Jules. Any further discussion? Did we include the date on it?
November 14th?
Okay. Just making sure. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. I do want to reflect on that. That was a really great discussion, and I think we're doing what we need to here, so please acknowledge that. Governance and policy report. Any questions for the governance and policy report?
So, the following, for the, October 12th meeting, Are the people crossed out no longer members, or were they absent?
They were absent. Yeah. Well, actually, I'm glad you mentioned that, because Ami is actually not able to be on the committee right now. But we didn't know that at the time, so he was just
Yeah.
absent.
And head up 410, and maybe it's in the notes, but 410, is that a new one? I didn't see any red lines on that one, or like in the second read. Well, no, we're not the consent agenda yet, but
Yeah.
the other ones I could follow the changes easier.
I have a question regarding 520 in the discussion. there.
Could we finish the 410 one first?
Oops, sorry.
It's all right. It says 410 proposed.
What was your question again, Dan?
Oh, I was just, like the other ones, I can see the red lines, 501, 02, 10, 16. But 410 has no red line, at least on my version. So I wasn't sure what I was reviewing, or if it was the whole thing.
Yeah, no, this is just the new MSBA version of the 410,
Okay.
so. Yeah, sorry on this.
So are there changes in this one, or that weren't highlighted, or are there no changes?
I don't believe there were changes from the first read to the second read, because I don't think we
Oh,
revisited
no, they would be,
410.
yeah. There were no changes from the first read to the second read.
Okay. yeah.
I'm sorry, I got
But
mixed
then
up
on-
in the conversion
On
from
the
the,
501s, those ones we
district.
captured the changes.
yes.
Okay. 501, 02, 10, and 16.
Yeah, I misunderstood
And
your
the
question.
changes would be similar, the changing the charter to math and
Yep,
science.
yeah, that was easy to follow. Yep, I just didn't see the changes in 14.
And there's one other thing. Oh,
Is
you
this-
had something.
I have a question regarding the discussion on 520, the student surveys. And are parents able to request the questions asked? Not the responses, but just what questions are you asking our kids?
I believe you can,
I
yes.
think it's in the policy
Yeah.
that parents need to be given that in advance. I am almost positive I remember reading that prior to, we can request a copy of the survey.
I think you're right, Mr. Vetch. 520, is that the?
Student survey.
That is a
I
comment.
think you are right.
It's one that wasn't in our packet,
It's,
Yeah.
we're
policies
just
on first or
discussing it.
second, but it's in the
Yeah.
discussion in the minutes, so that's why I was confused.
Yeah, and that was because we didn't want to overload the board with
That's fine.
mathematic.
It'll come in
Yeah, so the-
November for a first read.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the committee's really ramped up and really going through these policies, so there is a lag.
And I know, Lozano, you reached out about some pronouns,
Mhm.
but that was shared with the governance
Okay.
committee, so we will address that there.
And same thing with the 503. Sorry. Teacher Lozano's suggestion on 503
Yeah, that'll be addressed at the
at the
governance committee, so
Okay.
that'll stay as a first read.
Okay.
Any other questions from the governance reports? Student report. You got anything for us?
Yeah, kind of a little bit of an update. So I mean, as we go into the fall, like getting back to the flow of things after the first 2 months is really important for the students, just because you're coming from the summer, you're trying to get back into that routine. Kind of, it's really important just because you're trying to set a standard for yourself for the rest of the year. How good your grades are going to be, trying to just keep everything up, trying to get into a flow, and our students have done a really good job of that this year. We're going to talk about kind of more like our extracurriculars, such as like sports, and Joe's going to cover the clubs. But in our fall, for this fall, like our sports have done really well. Like our girls volleyball team, they went 13-9 this season, and they have a section game coming up on Thursday against SPA. So, you know, they have a really good chance at that, and they've been doing really well the entire season. And it's not easy being a student athlete here at MSA just because we have it's a really intense environment, you know, and to be able to perform well on the court and off the court is just like we're really proud of everybody here. Our girls cross country team just won the conference as well. They've been doing really well. They've been crushing it for years. And, you know, the boys cross country team came second in the conference too. So, you know, everybody's been doing pretty well. All our sports, everybody's been working really hard. And, you know, it's not easy, you know, coming from the summer into here just because you're trying to figure out who you are again, what you're going to get involved in, what clubs you want to be a part of. You know, we have a lot of clubs with a lot of different people. We have a lot of variety in our sports, a lot of student athletes, and, you know, just to see everybody kind of trying to get involved. That's what something that me and Joseph talked about too, just trying to get more people involved in something besides just being in the classroom, because, you know, you get burnt out. You don't really get to talk to a lot of people. But yeah, we're really just trying to reach a lot more different clubs, get feedback from everybody. We've started sending out Google Forms, trying to see how they're feeling, what they want us to bring up in the meetings. You know, it's most of the things that I've been hearing when I talk to students, just good things about just trying to get back into the flow, get their routine down, and, you know, to see everybody, a lot of people being successful with that. It's just like, it's really good just to see. So, especially just from like the sports side. But he'll cover the clubs and stuff.
Yeah, so also speaking of sports on my end, I do a sport outside of MSA, which is swimming. Since last year, I remember I brought up my very first Division III coach offer / person who reached out to me, and now I have 42 who have reached out to me, shown interest, and with that, I have been trying my utmost hardest trying to find a high school team for MSA. I reached out to like at least 10 schools. I just got off like the phone with St. Paul Central and all that, and I mean, I'm just working tirelessly day in and day out trying to make it work and let MSA have one more thing, you know, before I dip out. So that's something that's been really fun on my part. Some other cool things, not 3 new clubs, but 2 new clubs I've been able to implement this year, and also an update on my current club that I created. One thing that for people who are new to the board, I lead Black Student Union. Originally it was Africa Club. Since I was in 6th grade, it was Africa Club, but I rebranded it to Black Student Union last year because I wanted it to also talk about African American culture, and it has become the biggest club in MSA, and it has grown from just 4 people, which is the officers, to now we're trying to get a field trip to Atlanta, which is we're going to on a civil rights field trip to Atlanta, Birmingham, Selma, and Montgomery for a civil rights tour, and going on that one with the high schoolers of MSA. That's been something I've been able to plan out with Miss Brooks and the lady from World Strides, which is the company we're partnering up to do this. We actually had a parent-teacher conference last week for that, so 2 weeks ago actually for that. So that was really cool. Something that just seeing how far I've been able to bring the club on my own, it's been something really cool on my part. Another thing that I want to talk about is 2 new clubs I've been able to implement. One is Christian Youth United. There is, originally I had the idea of starting a Christian club at MSA, and not only just a Christian club, but also like a youth group where we can talk about faith, and not only does it have to be like oriented like around Jesus and whatnot, but also bringing kids closer to the kids of MSA, like closer to one another, making new friendships, and also strengthening their hope in school. We had our very first meeting today, and typically how we do it is that we would just go around this circle, share like one thing we're happy about, and then afterwards we would then have like a lesson given by one of the students. And one thing that I'm trying to go away from, which I've done with all my clubs, is teaching on the smart board and giving out a lesson. This time it's more about everybody being included, everybody being a leader. So it's like I started it with 2 other students, but that does not mean I'm going to be leading the lessons, right? I'm giving the turn like for other students to be leading lessons, and teaching about whatever topic they wanted to teach about that day, giving them 15 minutes for that. Afterwards, I would give them a verse, and then they would have time to meditate about that. And then we'll come in, and then next week we will talk about that verse and what that is, and then we'll end off in a prayer before the day starts. And it has been very successful. And I'm very glad to see that that's how like in the very first day, how successful it's been. Last thing I want to talk about is student initiative. This is something that I have been able to work on with another student at MSA, with Miss Brooks. And what student initiative is, that's kind of the name that we've rough drafted for it, but it's more of bringing the MSA students closer with the teachers here at MSA, because the school environment has always, or the school culture at the school has always been about work, and sometimes we also fail to realize that the teachers were students like us once, and what Ms. Brooks and I, with like a lot of things that happened last year, we saw that, and we want to bridge that gap between the students and the teachers, and foster better relationships between one another, because at the end of the day, they are the ones who are there to give us that better future, and that's not like really recognized, and I think that is something that should be appreciated and that should be celebrated, not only amongst each other but at the school level. So yeah, that's all.
Do you have any updates for the other clubs?
That was it.
Got it.
I think the idea of surveying the students is a great idea. Just make sure that you go through the admin on that survey, because they'll need to proof it before you send it.
Yeah.
That is part of the policy, so
Gotcha.
Set up some time with them before you send that out, please. All right, thank you. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? I can.
A motion to approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. And just as a side note, the legislative mandated adoption, that is, the policy is already implemented, it's state law, so that's why it's just a first read and done. So just for clarification for people who may be wondering why that is tagged differently. All right, on to discussion and decision. So we have a number of policies we're going to repeal, and I will let Ms. Patel.
So 202 is up for repeal, as well as 203.1, just to prevent any future conflict with bylaws, as we saw happen just last quarter. Take them all separately? Or-
Yep, and we have tabled 515A.
515 is tabled for, 515A is tabled for next time. It'll come with 515. 524.1. That's school procedure, so it's more of an administrative responsibility that we need to keep there. 529 as well is school procedure based. Any questions?
Well, we could do it one by one if we need to.
Did we need to vote on the consent agenda? Or we not?
Oh,
I think we made the motion.
yeah, sorry, thank you.
Never had the discussion.
We just need the vote.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Okay.
sorry about that. So the motion was made by Hiddle, seconded
By Lozano.
by Lozano. All in favor? Aye, for consent agenda, sorry.
Thank you.
Opposed? Abstained? My apologies.
No, I'm good, we got it, but then just a question, so are these are considered policies by MSBA? Is that why we're
No,
doing?
they're not
They're not?
mandated
Okay.
policies from MSBA. They're completely discretionary. With, I shouldn't say that about 515A because I'm not certain, it does have to do with SPED and records, but MSBA does have a 515 that will incorporate what our 515A has, if I have that correct. And we'll see that next month more clearly.
And it's tabled because we have to do them at the same time. We have to approve the one to repeal the other.
So why, and maybe it was in the notes, why are we doing 524 and 529?
But those are also discretionary policies.
Specific to admin. Admin duties.
529 is an MSA policy, it's not an MSBA one. That was an open lunch and campus policy that was just created by MSA. And there's an actual new 529
Something
that is
different.
MSBA
Mhm.
that's coming.
Yeah, it
So this
has
is
a
just-
completely different title though, but our 529 was
It's procedural.
felt to be, managing the kids on campus, managing our campus space, which I felt was really administrative. Handbook maybe, student handbook?
I was gonna
Student
say, I'd like
guidance.
to see this somehow make it into the student handbook. Having worked here in the study hall area, there were kids who had, seniors, juniors and seniors who had study hall at that time, 7th hour. And they would and they knew that they could start work earlier on those days because they had that ability. So while I see that it's procedural, I wanna make sure that it gets put into that student handbook.
So I should also say 529 is being repealed. I don't think that the school, well, maybe
believe it
it's
is
better
high,
if
but-
you speak on this, Mr.
Yeah.
Vetch, but I don't think MSA has an open lunch policy or option for the kids right now. I mean, I should let
Right,
you
and
speak
this
on
isn't even
that.
something that's even being followed right now, so it's not even a policy that's even been done for the last few years, so it's something that's kind of redundant. It's not-
Pre-COVID,
yeah,
it was followed.
Yeah,
just
it
letting
hasn't
you know.
been, right.
I think a
But
lot
coming out,
of
it
things
hasn't, so it's really a
post-COVID have
policy
changed.
that isn't needed anymore.
So the kids don't sign out, they can't sign out.
Right.
For open lunch, no.
Yeah.
But this isn't just over lunch, this is open campus, so it's not solely lunch.
I don't think they can
It
sign
means
out.
that they could leave during study hall, sign themselves out and go
No.
work.
We don't. And PSEO is a different element, some kids come and they leave, but for as far as, they're on campus, they stay on campus.
So tonight we're talking about taking this off the books, correct?
Yes.
So we will not have a policy for open lunch or, in this case.
Correct.
Because from what I understand, administration explained, is the kids can't do this anyway. They don't let the kids sign out without reason
Or parent permission.
or parent permission. Of course, doctor appointments, things like that, but.
Yeah, and I just wonder if I guess it goes back to my original question, is why do we have it as a policy versus a procedure from the administration anyways?
Right.
And so maybe we had it since 2001, but maybe we shouldn't have.
Right. And there might have been a need at a time.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Well, and how much we've grown since then,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like just our population.
Yep.
And the
Yeah, I'm not
administration
faulting it,
at
I'm
the
just
time.
saying,
Yeah.
now we're trying to clean up a lot of the policy procedure, right?
So do you want to make a motion to repeal 202?
Do them separately?
I think we need to.
Okay. Motion to repeal policy 202.
Second that motion.
Discussion?
Can you repeat why we're repealing this?
So what is in 202, the entire 200 series is pretty much, 202 is incorporated into our bylaws. And what we found happened was when we adopted new bylaws, we were having conflicts. And it was creating quite a bit of distress. So although the bylaws trump to really get that message out and have conflicting policy on our website was, and we were asked to by our authorizer to make sure we don't have conflicting policy.
Any further comments? Discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Motion to repeal 203.1. I can first that one.
Yep. Motion to, do you want me to make the motion?
Yep.
203.1.
I can second it. Discussion? Here again, it was the conflicting with our bylaws. That's why we're,
Well, can I add another bit of information on 202 that may be helpful to people?
I think you have to go back to revisit it, but.
The officer roles are codified in 317.305, which is what we adopted into the bylaws. So those roles are really delineated in statute, so just didn't want to have policy that might stray. Sorry.
Does that change anybody's vote?
I'm sorry.
Okay. Verifying. Okay, so the motion for 203.1 repeal made by Heddle, seconded by myself.
Second by King. Oh.
Oh, sorry,
203.
203.1.
Okay, 203. Yeah, sorry.
Discussion on 203.1 was that it's the same concept, conflicting with bylaws. So, any further discussion on 203.1? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Tabled 515A. So now we're to 524.1.
Motion to repeal 524.1.
Second that motion?
Discussion? To reiterate, it was admin specific, so.
Yeah, within the walls of the school.
Mhm. Okay.
We have to vote.
Any further discussion on 524.1? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Motion passes.
Motion to repeal 529.
I can second.
Discussion? Here again, discretionary policy within the means of administration and our handbook policy, our handbooks. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Mary. Motion passes. Would we like to recess for a 5-minute break before going into closed session? Yep. Motion to recess for 5 minutes.
Motion to recess for 5 minutes.
Seconded by Ryan. We will reconvene 8:22.
They need to like, put on the pads. when they-
Welcome back. The next part of our meeting is a closed meeting. This meeting will be closed pursuant to Minnesota State Statute 13D.05, subsection 33B, to evaluate the performance of an individual subject to the board's authority. Now that we have the room cleared, we'll need to shut the door and we will return when the conversation is concluded. State Statute 13D.05 sub 3 to evaluate the performance of Randy Vetch, who is subject to the board's authority. I motion to recess until tomorrow evening, 10:25 at 6 o'clock.
I second that motion.
Dan,
Give it to Dan.
discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? No. That concludes our meeting. Meeting recessed. Meeting recessed.